welcome everyone. It's so good to see everyone. Big shout out and thank you to our fabulous corporate partners. And I think we have representatives today from all of our corporate partners for our leadership seminar series. 3M, A Better Force, Applied Materials, Chevron, and Texas Instruments. So wave if you're from one of those. Lots of you here. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for being here and thanks for joining in. My name is Trisha Berry. I'm director of the Women in Engineering program. We are talking about communication skills today. Sorry, not sorry is a fun way to talk about some of these things. So we're going to dive into what does that mean. Let's talk about what words mean. Does anyone want to talk about what they were noticing or what they were observing as you maybe went into that Padlet, looked at these words?
I think it was really interesting seeing the variety of definitions that were there and things that I hadn't even thought of. And other things where, you know, for example, the word firm, I'm always called firm. And I don't know if that's a trigger word for me, because a lot of times, you know, especially working as a woman in a corporate world, sometimes words like firm and bossy are kind of used to put you down at times. And so it was just interesting how just one word had so many avenues of thoughts and feeling.
Yeah, that's great. Pauline?
I was just saying 450 degrees for fire. I definitely did not think about
that. That's funny.
That was me.
Yeah. What else? What else did you notice or had kind of an aha, I didn't think about that moment?
Some of these could have both negative and positive connotations depending upon how they're used.
And they can mean really different things to different people, right? I even think about that one, Samia, you were saying firm. If someone says, we have a firm deadline, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to me, right? It can mean very different things. Firm to me might mean, you know, it's firm, but firm isn't like definitive, right? Maybe for others, firm is like, that is the end all be all deadline. It could be really different.
And it's also the way it's said, like the tone of how you're presenting it or saying it, that can also make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Or if it's in all caps, right? In the chat or in an email or in a text. Are we yelling firm? Or are we just, it's firm? Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on this exercise? This is really meant to just get us thinking about communication and words, and that communication is very personal, right? We can take things a lot of different ways. It comes from our own experiences, how we might interpret things, how we might believe a word makes sense in our spaces. And so I like this as just kind of a stage setting to start to think about what is happening here? What else do I need? What other context do I need? What else is happening in this space that will help me make sense of this word? Or do I need to ask some more questions and not make so many assumptions, maybe, if there's a word that could have multiple meanings?
I'd say it's interesting to see everybody's noticing that you can have a bunch of different ideas per each word, and working in a big corporation where you have a lot of expat employees who English is not their first language, and a lot of obviously, especially now with communication, so much email, it definitely makes you a little more sympathetic to maybe a use of a word and a connotation maybe they weren't intending on. Sometimes you get emails from folks like that, and you're like, whoa, they were like way off, or really they came off strong, you know, but words can be received in much different ways. So it gives you, I guess, a little more sympathy for those kinds of conversations as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be taken so many different ways. And I think that's the challenge with our language today, right? So much left up to interpretation. If we don't seek to clarify, it can lead to problems. Well, that's a great lead into challenges. Well, it was fun watching all of these things starting to pop into that Padlet so I could see what y'all were talking about. Does anybody want to share about something that they learned or something that they thought about in their group? Let's hear about some of your discussions.
We were talking about the camera aspect, which I think everybody can relate to. I am super guilty of, as an employee, if my camera is off, which it often is because I have a toddler and a husband right near me, I'm way less likely to hold myself accountable to paying attention, and often find myself getting very easily distracted. So not only is it negative for the speaker, it's negative for myself as well a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's definitely a virtual world challenge. Thanks.
We talked about speaking too quickly and how you can lose your message, that people may not be able to process what you're saying, or you might leave out important information or words to help your audience follow.
Yeah. And that happens a lot in presentations, right? When we are presenting and we get nervous, we speed up. And so recognizing when that happens and slowing down, especially in a presentation, can be really important.
Okay, yeah, in our group, Carmen brought this up at Chevron, and it's really the same at TI and likely a lot of other companies. When it comes to speaking another language, there's a lot of the obvious problems that come in, but even in industry, besides the traditional languages, a lot of businesses, organizations have their own sort of set of language, right, and terminology that they use and acronyms that they use. Even within the same company, if you move to a different team or a different business, it can feel like there's a new language you have to learn. So that can be a challenge.
Very true.
And going off of that, in our group, we had people working in with teams in Taiwan and Brazil, and I was working in Asia. And so we were talking about English not being the first language, or even having a totally different culture, and the problems that it causes in communication and getting the message across.
I actually had a question on what couching statements are. I don't think I've heard of that before.
Does anybody know what that means? I guess I should have clarified what all these things mean before you stick them on there. So that's couching statements as a question would be, the report is due on Friday, right? When it's due on Friday. So it's making something that is a statement. That's probably not the best example, but that was what came into my mind. But it's taking something that for sure is a reality, is a fact, and saying it as a question and it kind of goes to some of this minimizing stuff. It's like, instead of just being bold and assertive and saying it, it's trying to soften it in a way and ask it in a question. So that's what that statement means. Does anybody else want to clarify that a little bit better, or have an example that's a little better on that than mine?
Trish, I think it's sort of like when, if I'm asking I'm telling my director, my team's going to work overtime this weekend, if it's okay with you. But I know it's required. I know it needs to get done. So I usually just tell him, just so you know, I'm going to work overtime this weekend. I'm not asking him for permission. Here it is. This needs to get done.
Yeah. Because what happens if we put it in that questioning format? What can happen?
They'll start questioning your input and why you want to do it. So, when I've done it in the past, it's like, well, do you really need to? And I'm like, well, yeah, I do. Well, why? Well, and then I have to justify everything. So now it's just like, I'm going to get it done. This needs to get done in order to meet these requirements. And There we go. And sometimes I'll throw in a little caveat is I will minimize down the road and get it, lowered down. So it's still not asking for permission, but it's still kind of giving them a way out.
It can also be
Right.
used as a suggestion in an environment where ideas are not welcome or where you feel unable to share them freely. So when you couch it as a question, it kind of lessens the impact, or it's easier to bring it up in a meeting where maybe people are not looking for your input.
All right, well, let's move into sorry, not sorry. How many of you catch yourselves apologizing for things and then afterwards you're like, well, why? That wasn't my fault, or why did I do that? Yeah, I mean, we all fall prey to that, right? Okay, I'm gonna throw another article here in the chat. This is 25 things women should stop apologizing for at work. Let's hear from you all. What did you talk about there? What were your takeaways or strategies to help us not say sorry all the time? Who wants to share?
Hi guys. Whenever I was working prior to graduate school, I had this problem, like most females, and my boss wrote on my board, like, I am not sorry. So I saw it every day. And it helped me, like, writing with because I saw every day, like with emails, not apologizing for things that were out of my control and stuff like that, because not every email needs to have an apology in that.
That's great. What a great manager to catch that and give you that tip. That's fabulous. And email's easy, right? To do that. Sorry. How many of you, I will catch myself saying I'm sorry and I go back and change it now. I'm like, I am not sorry that I was busy and could not respond to your email instantaneously. And it's COVID time, so that means that time is irrelevant and you're going to get it when you get it, right?
And actually, that's what I just talked about. That's exactly what I did this morning. Is I apologized for something that wasn't even my doing, but I was tasked by my director to finish it. And it's like, apologies just didn't get done. Wait a minute, why am I apologizing? But one of the things I was telling the students in my group was, don't be sorry for making a mistake. You're gonna make it, grow from it. I made plenty over my years, and I'm still there. They haven't fired me, so own it and learn from it.
Yeah, and I love that, Chandler, in the chat. They're tired of saying sorry for the delayed response. I've actually started replying back to people who apologize and just tell them, we are in COVID time. There's no apologies needed for anything. We are just happy to be here, and you should be happy and thankful that you got a response, whenever that might be. So,
from our group brought up this really good point. She brought up how she stopped using, and I've also started implementing this, is instead of saying sorry for the delayed response, you turn it around and say thank you for your patience for that email. So that kind of like, because sometimes it's just hard to walk away from the fact personally as us that we took so long. So this kind of, you're acknowledging and being grateful for the other person's patience. And I like that strategy a lot.
Yeah.
So
I think it's difficult because we're getting into this age of work where you're never off of work and you should always be available. And I've taken the time now to say, like, I'm going to get to this email tomorrow. I'll send this thing to you tomorrow, so that I'm not going to like waste my time when I need to be sleeping or taking a break from work. Right.
Setting those expectations right up front. Yeah.
And great. one of the members in our group, Zoel, she brought up a really, really nice point that when you say sorry, you're accepting the blame. So are you ready to accept the blame? So I really like that. I'm going to incorporate that into my thinking.
That's great.
along those lines, when you we kind of perused through the article, and many of those examples are very it's due to the melding of personal and professional needs, right? Like coming back from maternity leave or you were sick, and the tactic of replacing sorry with thank you. That's something I've been really I do and I practice. And what it does is it invites the other person to provide their empathy. And we're all human. We all get sick at some point in time, or somebody we know gets sick. I mean, these are just human things. And so I think by thanking the other person, it invites them to think about the situation a little bit differently. And the following conversation probably is a little bit different from a blame or a negative situation to, look, I had a human thing happen, and you understand, and you hopefully can sympathize or empathize, and let's move on.
Somebody
mentioned that I did it, but somebody mentioned that sorry was really just kind of a buffer word that we've like absorbed and stuff like that, and that in order to kind of just make yourself like, it's more of a humility thing as well. And particularly for me, it's been an overcompensation thing from being told I was bossy because I wasn't being very like sorry like about everything. I just started saying things and I was told I was bossy. So it's a way to like overcompensate, and like over time you have to like kind of go back to the neutral stage of like, you don't need to say sorry for that. You should say sorry for this, and you're being in that like right zone of like, this is being, you know, firm, which is one of those words we talked about. So.
And we can be nice and friendly and humble without having to say sorry all the time, right? So it's figuring out how do we do that without, like you said, kind of that filler word, feeling like we need to say sorry because it's so easy to do. Yeah.
Something I was thinking about also is that a lot of times I just say sorry if the other person like had some sort of inconvenience, even if it wasn't necessarily my fault. It just like, I put it on me sometimes. So this conversation in general is good to look at, and especially the one declining a request. We talked about that one in our group pretty, how it was interesting, because I can't imagine myself being like, no, I can't do that, go find someone else. But, you know, it's something just that we need to work on.
Yeah, it's a hard one to decline without saying sorry. Yeah.
Well, I think that this is kind of inferred from some of the conversation we've been having, especially the fact that it's become a filler word. But sometimes we are truly sorry for things, right? And it really minimizes those situations when you want to truly express your sorriness and you wanting to take ownership of something that had happened. And anyway, so I think it's important to really have precision of language and make sure that the other people in your lives really understand when you say sorry that you actually really mean it, and what that you're standing behind that.
Good point.
One of the things I talked about was, you know, it says asking for time off. So what I've learned over the years with my different managers is I don't ask for the permission anymore. I basically tell them I'm taking a couple of days next week. You have any concerns with it? Let me know. So I'm not saying I'm sorry I'm going to take it, because I need to take it. And if they have a problem with it, they can come back to me. And usually it's like, oh yeah, no problem. I'm like, okay, thanks.
I think women in the workplace are generally going to try to do more than what maybe their male counterparts would do. So not taking time off or never saying no to something, even if it's like not reasonable for them.
And on the concept of time, maybe this will help to say no easier. We only have 16 hours in a day if you count sleep. And so, you know, life's too short to be saying yes to things we don't want to do.
I know that, so working in a manufacturing environment, I get hit with a lot of requests from a lot of different people, but I can't do it all, nor is it all necessarily sanctioned. But I actually went through a time where, so my personality is if I can't do something, I'm going to tell you I can't, because I don't want to leave you hanging. But then I became known as having this negative, well, Diane never does anything. She's very negative. And that wasn't the truth. And I noticed another coworker who would say yes to everything, but never did anything. And he got accolades. And I'm like, well, I don't want to swing the other way. So kind of what I found was a meet in the middle. And what I do is when someone asks me to do something that I know I don't have time to do, I said, you know, that's a really good idea. Send me the details in an email. And you'd be surprised how many emails I don't get. But no longer am I seen as being a negative person who doesn't want to do anything. Sometimes it's just about people wanting to know they're heard. And then if someone actually does send me an email, I know it's more important. I get all the details, and then I can bring it up with my boss, their boss, and say, hey, this was brought up, because they're the ones that set the priorities of what I spend my time on. So it's just something that has worked for me, because I'm like you, I want to be honest with people, because when I ask someone to do something, I want to know if they're going to work on it or not. And I don't take it personal, but a lot of people do. So I just say, well, send me an email. That sounds like a good idea. Send me an email.
I like it. You have that traceability.
And most of the time, I don't get nothing.
I'm gonna
start using that for sure.
I told some of the women in my group, I'm working with all men, and my last team, I was one of 15 people and the only female, and having a baby and then coming back to work and having to pump at work, right? I work in a drilling environment where we have a set schedule, but it's always these impromptu meetings, and there's one place that I can go to pump and it's booked up by other, nursing moms. So all the time I was having to excuse myself from meetings because I had to go pump, right? And then I'd call into the meeting from there while pumping, and I'm like, guys, I'm really sorry, but we're 45 minutes over and I have to go pump. And I said it all the time because I was the only one, doing that. I didn't have any other examples to follow by. But thank goodness for like these men, that some of them, not all of them, that are saying like, you are ridiculous for saying sorry, like please go. Like the fact that you're even calling in while pumping is like but I'm like, I'm gonna do that, I'm committed to my work. But I had this incessant feeling, because I'm a new mom and the only woman and the only mom with a newborn at home, and so all these unique circumstances for me compared to my coworkers, that it was hard because I couldn't, nobody else is taking pump breaks or fretting about their infant at home right away. Like, so it was really challenging for me, but I felt really supported by a few of the men on my team that stood up for me a lot of those times.
So I know this is a bit of a side note, Tricia, but Juliana, so I had my first son a year and a half ago, and I read a book about going back to work and pumping, and one really great piece of advice. And so for when this comes up in the distant future, potentially for some of you, I took the advice of the book. It said, when you get back, sit down with your colleagues, mine are all men, and tell them, I will be going to pump and I will be pumping during meetings, but I'll be there, I'll be participating. I thought it was going to be the most uncomfortable, awkward. It was not. They were so supportive. They all, turns out, have wives, had kids, and were and understood, it's not a weird thing. It just is a thing. Go do it.
Totally. And that was the thing, is nobody was making me feel like, nobody said anything about it, painted me in any kind of bad light. It was just this like, I'm not doing the same things you guys are doing, and I feel this guilt. And so I'm saying I'm sorry, but I'm really not sorry because I'm going to do it anyways. So yeah. Yeah.
And I would have felt that way if I hadn't had that conversation. They 100% were like, no, all good.
So I think that's a great thing to lead into our last little bit here, because we are at time and I want to be respectful. That if we can also be those allies and those supporters of each other, and when we catch someone apologizing, like what we just heard, about something that really you don't need to be apologizing about, and sharing back that empathy, that understanding, and catching each other when we are using these minimizing words, when we are our friends are maybe couching things as a question now that we know what that means, or saying sorry all the time, helping each other get past some of those communication challenges so that we're all stronger in those spaces and we're all supported. So I've stuck one last article in there. We're not going to break out since we're at the end of our time, but I wanted to share this with you. And it's actually not 9 tips. It used to be 9 tips. They just updated this in March and now it's 5 tips, but it still has the same 9 tips link. And it says to listen. I think we probably all understand that listening is really key to communicating and how important that is for us to do. And especially in this Zoom world, trying to be sure that we are not multitasking in such a way that we are not listening and hearing what others are saying, knowing our audience, always understanding who is it that we're communicating with and what does that communication need to be. It doesn't mean minimize here. Minimize is the third one. It's not meaning minimize your words or use those minimizing words. It's meaning don't go crazy in your words. We don't have to say so much or write so much that we lose what we're actually trying to say. So sometimes minimizing can actually get your point across a lot better. Over communicate. I think right now, the strategy of over communicating cannot be emphasized enough. The more we can share and talk and communicate with each other, the more we understand what's going on, especially when we cannot see each other all the time. And then last one is body language. And we talked about that a little bit at the beginning, even with the videos on or off and how we are paying attention and engaging. Body language still comes through in this kind of format. So hopefully those 5 tips might help you out a little bit. I want to give a big shout out again to our fabulous corporate partners, our 3M folks. Where are 3M folks? Wave 3M, yay. A Better Force, Samya's up there. Applied Materials, woohoo. And Chevron, we have several from Chevron that are here, and Texas Instruments as well. Hi, Texas Instruments. So thank you all for your fabulous support. Thank you all. Have a fabulous Thanksgiving and break and holidays.
I was gonna mention to them some feedback that we get as Chevron employees. We have these internal documents called career development plans, and the whole idea is that you meet every year with your supervisor, and it's basically like your wish list of jobs that you realistic jobs and short term, middle term, and long term on what you want to achieve in your career. And we have been taught or had these learning sessions with some women leadership in our company that they have done plenty of research of taking dozens and dozens of these CDPs, reading them with the names crossed out, and they're like, you can tell as soon as you read it if it's a guy or a girl that's written it, just by the way they use their language. A goal job for 5 years down the line that says, team lead, if you want to be a team lead for something, a guy standard language would say, I want to be a team lead of 5+ engineers in 3 years, versus a female CDP might say, if possible, if the timing works out with the appropriate experience, I would like to be a team lead in a few years. And that is, yes, like what Trisha just said, qualifying comments and how notorious women are for using them, and for somebody with just as much, if not better experience than a male, time and time again will be reaching for less. And less confident in the way that they present themselves on paper. So kind of, it's not necessarily saying I'm sorry, but it's a language issue in itself.
And I think ultimately, the whole point of like saying sorry or couching question, it comes down to confidence. And, I want all the students to, take away from this session, women are doing such amazing things while being pregnant, while breastfeeding. So just, be proud of who you are and your own unique perspectives, and don't be afraid to ask. You know, you might get rejected, but if you don't ask at all, then 100% you'll get a no. So just don't be afraid to ask for a promotion, or, you know, as she was saying, for the team lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I think it's very interesting is when you say sorry, oftentimes it's because you feel you can do better or do more. And so I think that plays a big role. But at the end of the day, you need to be aware that you can do anything, but not everything. And you do need to keep a balance within your life at work as well.
Very true.
I think this does raise questions around the double bind that women face, though, of you can either be nice and likable, or you can be considered an expert in your field. So I think that might be worthwhile to think more about why we find ourselves in these situations, that it is not necessarily that women are trying to take a back seat, and how you can be effective and not fall into that trap of, oh, I have to be likable.
The one thing that I would just like to add too is, as you enter the workplace, I think, you know, Tricia mentioned earlier about allies to one another. You know, when you go to meetings, you know, if you have somebody that you are frequently working with, right, have them provide you feedback, have them share your blind spots with you that you aren't seeing about yourself, right? And as you become more aware of those too, right, then you start practicing and incorporating on how to have some of that better communication, because you may be saying things that you don't even realize that you are.
Yeah, that feedback's really hard to ask for, but so critically important. So critically important.